So I do have I don't know, there's 4-ish stories that I think that have happened over the weekend. And one happened on Friday, actually, that I didn't cover on the podcast because it happened Friday afternoon, that I'm going to talk about. The big news story, which at this point, I'm sure everyone has heard about what the Pirates did with the Paul Skeens card. That's going to be the second half of the episode. The first half of the episode, I have a couple different things that I want to run down that I feel like were important things that happened over the weekend. So first, the 1/1 Red Shield Anthony Richardson was pulled from National Treasures. So for Richardson and for Panini, that's probably one of the biggest football cards from last year. I mean, it might be one of the first years that we see, because Bijan Robinson was also a rookie. There are some good rookies from the previous year. So there are a couple. I think that from that set, there's probably going to be some wide receivers and running backs who have some more important cards. I mean, depending on how Richardson does, obviously, but he's had a kind of a shaky first 2 years of his career. I mean, obviously being out for the second half of his first season, and then this season being benched for Joe Flacco, which is insane to me. But they've been going back and forth there. So there's also the Platinum 1/1, which I don't have to get into my displeasure with different types of 1/1s that come out of products. And, Panini obviously does this. They've got the Nebula 1/1. They've got the Black Sparkle 1/1. They've got the regular black 1/1 for Prism, at least. And they, across a couple other brands, they have this type of concept. But with this one, they have the red 1/1, I believe. And then I think there's also a Platinum 1/1, which is just the outside of the border, I believe, is one's red and then one's silver. Again, in my opinion, defeats the purpose of the 1/1, which I think is kind of unfortunate. The other news that happened over this past weekend that probably happened last night, I think, was the Dallas WNBA team is going to be getting the first pick, which more than likely means that that's where Paige Beckers is going to go. And you've heard me talk about Paige Beckers on this podcast a couple times, probably saying, in my opinion, if she hadn't gotten hurt, she would be as popular, if not more popular, than Caitlin Clark. I think all around, she's just as good, if not a better player, I think, than Caitlin Clark. I think Caitlin Clark hits threes. So that's one reason why she's got more of a flashy type of game and where she's going to be scoring a lot of points, where I think, Paige Beckers, I don't know. I potentially think that she could be a better player than Caitlin Clark. She's going to be coming to Dallas. That's going to be big for, I don't know how much. I don't know how much it's going to affect Luka's cards potentially, because having those two in the same city in Dallas, I think, is very interesting. And I think Paige Beckers, I believe she either had a card the year after Caitlin Clark for Bowman, because that first year where Caitlin Clark was in, Paige Beckers was hurt. She was out for the whole season, tore her ACL in the first practice. So that was unfortunate. And also the women's college basketball season has started as well, which I think is another interesting kind of concept, where the WNBA runs basically opposite of the NCAA, which then means also rookies who are going to get drafted basically play a year of basketball in a row. Caitlin Clark, she went from playing in the national championship game to 2 weeks later being the first overall pick, and then 2 weeks after that going into training camp and starting the season. It's pretty interesting stuff. Now, the third sort of shorter piece of news here. Apparently, Patrick Bet-David on the Iced Coffee Hour podcast, which I think is fine. It's a financial podcast. I don't know. I think financial content on YouTube if it's interesting, I don't think it's good in my opinion, because the interestingness of it makes the advice. I think that there are people that make financial content on YouTube like that. They're more focused on making an entertaining show rather than giving important financial information. And that's annoying to me. Also, I don't know if I love Patrick Bet-David's podcast either. I don't know. I mean, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into the politics of everything here, but he said that on this podcast, he offered one of the owners of the PSA 10 mantle $19 million for the card, and they declined. Now, the only person that can confirm that story is him, because the seller, or not even the seller, the person who owns the card is undisclosed. And he was saying that one person that owns it there's the Diamondbacks, or the Diamondbacks owner, I believe, is one of the owners of one of the PSA 10s. And I forget who he said the second person was, but he put in an offer to that third person who I guess people don't know who it is. That would be a very important piece of information for the sports card market to have. You know what he said? He said he said that the third one of the people was like a well-known sports card big name. That's what he said. I don't know who that would be. I mean, as soon as I heard that, I thought Shine, but at the same time, I know Shine's collection is pretty insane, and he's really the only notorious name, I think, within this space that is like known for having a crazy collection like that. So I think it could have been him potentially, but we don't know for sure if the $19 million offer was for him or was somebody else. We may never know. I mean, I've heard that card is valued at like 25. I think 19. I don't. It seems interesting that if you could get, I guess the person maybe says, I'm not doing it for less than 25. So like, obviously I think if you're Bet David, maybe that's why he looked at it and said, well, I'm going to offer 19 because it's below what the market value is saying. I don't know exactly here, but again, it didn't sell. So the offer was rejected. So the 19 million was not a sale for it, which I think that would obviously be higher than, I think it was the 12 million for the SGC 10 mantle. And I think that's the record, I'm pretty sure, for the highest sports card. So this one obviously would have blown that out of the water. The last piece of news that happened on Friday was the Pittsburgh Pirates came basically out of nowhere. Like, we've seen teams do sports card nights and be involved in sports card marketing, but like they came out of the woodwork, and in my opinion, and they just said, hey, we want this card to be at the field. And they offered like an insane package for this card, 30 years worth of season tickets, meet and greet with Paul Skeens, autographed jerseys, autographed memorabilia. They offered like you could play a full game on the field with 30 people. And I forget if there was anything else. Oh, and then Livy Dunn came and said that you could sit in the stand, or you could sit in her suite, which is assuming Paul Skeen's suite because they're dating. So I would imagine that's his suite or her suite together probably. But either way, the 30 years worth of season tickets is the thing that I think is the most interesting part of this conversation, because some people were estimating that could be worth like $2 million. And then also some people were saying that it could be worth like $200K, depending on where the seats are. Like if you're getting front row, it's probably closer to the 2.5. And if you're sitting, however far back, maybe not the last row, but in the middle, sort of, that's where that $200K comes in, which I guess I don't know if you would be able to sell the tickets. I mean, they really just came out with this offer. Like I didn't see any details of like what you can do with the tickets. Like if you can sell the tickets, that seems like maybe the route, because again, if Paul Skeens goes on and becomes one of these great pitchers and the Pirates potentially go on some sort of run, that season, those season tickets, you got what's it called? You got playoff tickets. You got a lot of value in some of those tickets if the Pirates can kind of turn it around. They're one of the worst teams in the league other than Paul Skeens, I think. So like, if they can turn it around, those tickets could be worth a lot of money and be potentially very valuable. Also 30 years is just like an insane number to me, which the most expensive Paul Skeens card was his PSA 8. I think it was his 1-of-1 Superfractor autograph that sold back in September. And that was $132,000. It was $130,235. It was in that 130 range. Forget the exact number, but that would then make this card the most expensive card for him, which that makes sense. I would say it's going to be an interesting argument one way or the other, which of these cards should be the most valuable. I mean, this is one that I talked about on the show probably like Thursday, and I wanted to find some other episodes because I did 2 episodes last week about the Topps Chrome and stuff that's been coming out. But I thought that this was pretty important because honestly, like 30 years worth of season tickets is nothing to, laugh at here. Or maybe it is. I don't know. But, I think you understand what I'm saying. Like, we'll see. But then the interesting thing about that story was that Michael Rubin was in the comments of the Pirates tweet being like, I'm going to outbid you or something like that. He said something along those lines. I forget exactly what he said. Let me actually pull up the tweet really quick, because it was something like, I'll see you, which makes me almost think that it potentially was some sort of sorry, I may need to outbid you on this one, is what he said. Which then it makes me wonder if it's like some sort of marketing thing here with Topps and the Pirates. Like, again, if you are also the 200, whatever this ends up being, whatever it's 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. I would say they probably got a lot of that money back from impressions of them coming out with that tweet and that offer. Like, that's one of the interesting things about sports cards and with marketing is, like, if something goes viral, not even with sports card, but just marketing in general, if something goes viral, you're getting an insane amount of organic value just from that like every sport, I mean, I wrote about it on SI, but like every sports card publication was writing about this. Basically every sports media place was writing about this. So like, I think it would be, I don't know, maybe I'm gonna have to see if there's some sort of calculator and if I can figure out how much value they actually got from just tweeting this out. Like, granted, we don't know when the card's going to come out. So like this offer, if it's binding, like I don't know necessarily, or I don't even know if they end up going with the Pirates offer. But like, I just think it's like, I don't know how much value they got from that, just putting that information out, just saying that they were going to do this. But it's the same. It's like, which we should have guessed, because realistically we've seen bounties, and that's a lot of you get a lot of value from bounties, really. Like, there's a lot of marketing dollars that you can save by saying you're going to do a bounty. And then if they buy the card, like I said, there's a lot of financial stuff in here that I feel like you could be able to do. Like, if they buy the card, the Pirates do, they easily could just use that as like a tax thing, like a marketing thing. So it's very smart of them to do, which they, I guess, got lucky that it was just that their player was the one that ends up being the biggest player from this from this product, I suppose. But either way, I think you're going to see people probably talk about this until it gets pulled. Like, I don't know. I just see 30 years worth of season tickets, and that is like an insane headline, which that's how I wrote the headline. I mean, that's how a lot of people wrote it. So those are basically the main stories that happened over the week. I don't know what's going to, or the weekend. I don't know what's going to happen this next week, but also just overall, I think I've seen like 30 to 40, because we still have 2 or 3 days of like that Fanatics thing that they were offering the viewers and the people that pulled the card credits. So we're still a couple days until that actually expires. So I don't know. I mean, if you're watching the streams, like maybe you can keep watching them, because maybe potentially you're going to make some money from Topps.
Probably the second biggest player that is in Topps Chrome that has their patch is going to be, or is, Ellie De La Cruz. His 1/1 has been pulled, the 1/1 patch. And I mean, it always brings back the point, in my opinion, of like Topps is kind of doing whatever they want, I guess, with like what players they include in which products. And I get that there's a deadline. I don't know. I just don't love that a player like Ellie De La Cruz can make his debut in 2023 and play as well as he did, and then have his biggest card be after another full season has already been played. I don't know. To me, that doesn't really make much sense. I feel like there should be exceptions to the rule when it comes to Topps. Like, if you bat a certain thing, or you get a certain amount of hits, or a certain amount of home runs or something. I don't know. It just seems like there should be exceptions that are made for certain players that play well enough that they get their card in that year's product. Like, because that's one of the things that in 10 years from now, people are going to be confused. And again, it may just be a simple explanation of like, hey, there's a deadline, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's like you change the schedule. I don't know exactly how you fix this issue, really. It's like, because the way baseball really works is that it starts in February and it goes till October, November. So switching the release schedule probably wouldn't work, really. Maybe if you start the release schedule in April rather than January, that I think would maybe fix things. You would, again, and I just think maybe a consolidation of products also, I think, would maybe fix things potentially as well. But that's never something that's going to happen because I don't think Topps is going to want to leave money on the table really when it comes to the products that they can come out with. And how many they can just come out with unlimited products basically, and people will buy them. So I don't think Topps will really do that. I think that if they switch the release schedule where it's like April is where the first Series 1, let's just say Series 1. And I know that there are products that come out, I think, before Series 1. I just think like Series 1 coming out around opening day makes a lot of sense to me. And I think it changes the way that you can get anybody who is making their debut in that season. You can include them in a product where, I don't know. I mean, maybe you come out with like February. No, because then you would have the whole another season. I don't know. Maybe it's like a December Topps Chrome update comes out in December or something like that. And you're able to include every single player. You're able to get all the debut patches, all of these things. And I don't know, maybe it's just easier for the company to get autographs or whatever. But the Cruz card, that's been pulled. So the other news story that I want to talk about on the podcast today is going to be that Fanatics has announced they're canceling the Orlando Fanatics Collect show. And I guess it makes sense. I mean, you know, that area was really broken down pretty hard by the hurricane. So it makes sense that they wouldn't really be able, maybe they don't have the infrastructure ready for that type of thing, or maybe the area doesn't have the ability to, I don't know, not really, because Disneyland's down there, Disney World's down there, so they should have the space. I don't know, whatever. But Fanatics has announced they're going to cancel that show. And it makes me wonder, like, I know like a couple weeks ago, I was on Hobby Hotline talking about them postponing the show. And we were talking about shows in general. And I think the distinction between like a sports card show and what Fanatics Fest is, I think both of them have a place in the hobby if Fanatics wants to spend the money, because there's no way that Fanatics is really making money off of having all those celebrities there and paying all these people, like, and then having these monster shows, which I feel like, I wonder if the thing that I do wonder is if Fanatics Fest would have been like, or the second one in Orlando, if that would have been more like a card show and less like a TwitchCon or like PAX East or any of these like gaming conventions that happen. Because I think if Fanatics wants to do that, I think it's going to be tough for them to make money, I guess, because I look at it and I say, I don't know if, like, I look at TwitchCon and stuff like that, and the audience for a show like that, I wonder if the audience, how much larger it is for TwitchCon with video games than it compared to sports cards, because it has to be a pretty exponentially larger crowd of people who are going to those types of things versus like if you're into sports cards, are you going to travel to a show? I think the first one, yeah, probably. And I think they actually put on a pretty good show from all of what I saw. They didn't put on necessarily a card show. Like they put on a festival. And they put on a sports media marketing festival. That's really what they did here. And I don't know from year to year if they have the money really to do that. I mean, if Michael Rubin, but then here's the other thing. If Michael Rubin wants to just spend the money on these festivals for the Fanatics Fest and say, this is a marketing cost, this is going to cost us money, but we're okay because we're getting our name out there. We're doing all of these things. And the 10X thing in the hobby, I don't know if that's not really even a relevant conversation. I think still it's going to take years and years for them to really do that. And I think a Fanatics Fest is probably something that helps that. Now, does putting your logo and putting your name on a festival like a sports media festival like that, does that help your brand? Like, maybe. I mean, Michael Rubin, he's notorious for having those parties in the Hamptons. So I don't know. I mean, during the summer, I don't know, maybe he looks at that and says, well, if you want an invite to this party, you have to come to one of these festivals. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I mean, maybe that's where he can use his brand and his accolades to say, maybe that's where, or maybe they don't even have to pay the people. Maybe that's where it is. Maybe it's like, if you want to go to this party, you have to come to one of these festivals. Or it's like there's a certain celebrities that do have to go to the festival versus maybe some of them don't, potentially. But I think it's important for Fanatics to distinguish these shows and not market them as sports card shows, really, because I'm sure there was probably sports card dealings that were going on. But that is definitely not what the most important part of the show was. Like, the most important part of the show was the environment that they created in the show that they put on, like the festival or whatever. And, they do like Sneaker Con, they do like Twitch Con. I wonder if they'll switch it to Fanatics Con. I probably not. If now that they've sort of branded as Fanatics Fest, they probably won't change up the naming there. But I look at the other industries, and I think sports cards, like, I wonder if sports cards is an industry where people are mainly buying and selling online, and they're not really going. There's more. I wonder what here's what it is. I wonder what the difference in the crowd is that's only buying and selling online versus like only going to shows, because there are shows all over the country, and there's a robust list of shows you can go to if you're really looking to go any weekend. Like, and sure, not all of them are going to be the national. Maybe some of them are just going to be, in like the ballroom of some hotel, but there's going to be tables. And I think that is definitely something that I think is very interesting. And I don't know if Fanatics is going to come in and say, we want these shows, we want to make these Fanatics shows. I think that would be an interesting concept. I don't know if they should take over the national or like the Dallas card show. Like, I think, or the Burbank card show. I think that those are important pieces those are important branded shows in the hobby that I feel like if Fanatics came in, I don't know if that would be the best idea for the industry. And, I'm not sitting here saying that I think everything that Fanatics has done has been good for the industry. I think the exclusive contracts that they've gotten for some athletes have been not good for the industry. I think there has been some things that have been good for the industry. That they did the debut patches. They have come in with the NIL deals and do Bowman the Bowman basketball and Bowman football. So I think each thing I think is going to, in my opinion, for Fanatics, each thing needs to be judged separately. And unfortunately, we're not going to know what type of show this would have been in Orlando. Like, there are other shows in Florida that you can go to, but like, I wonder if this would have been more of a sports card show, like an actual, like, tried and true, like tables, people buying and selling the whole time, or if this would have been some sort of just like Fanatics festival in Orlando, like the same way that they had it in New York, like, where they have all of these different marketing activations and they have all of these things. I do wonder which one of those they would have chosen. I think it would be a good idea for them to market both. Like, I think it's the Fanatics Festival, I think, is an important thing for them to do. But I think if the show aspect of their business is one of the aspects I think that they still can grow in. It's really just going to depend on how they want to go about it. Do they want to do like a national style show where it's just like tables everywhere in a big convention center? Or are they going to focus more on the entertainment aspect and the marketing activations at these shows? With Orlando not being there, unfortunately, we won't know what that second show would have been. But we will see as, the winter's coming along. We're going to start seeing show schedules and stuff along those lines coming up for next year. And I think Fanatics, they have an opportunity to do it right, which I hope that they do. But like I said, I think each time Fanatics does something, it needs to be judged separately, not necessarily as a group, because I think they've done good things, and I think that there are some things that I would probably make a little bit of an adjustment to. So probably like a month ago, maybe like 2 months ago, it was announced that PSA was going to be partnering with GameStop. And I was skeptical. I was skeptical a little bit, mainly because I don't really the business that GameStop has run, I think it's very wild that they've been able to run a business like this and like not really rip people off, but like really, I don't know. I guess, I don't know, maybe rip people off. Maybe that's what they are doing. I don't know really, but it was announced that PSA was going to be partnering with GameStop and you were going to be able to get your cards graded through GameStop. And I had some concerns there just from like, who's handling these cards? Are these employees really like, are they suited? Are they able to? Which, I guess maybe I'm underestimating the employees that work at GameStop potentially there. So that one's on me, whatever. But it was announced yesterday or the day before, I think it was Monday, that Nat Turner was actually going to be joining the board at GameStop. And we've seen some pretty interesting stuff on the stock market with GameStop. I mean, we had already seen that like crazy thing where it was like they noticed that a bunch of people had like whatever the thing is when you bet against a stock. I guess data had come out that there was a bunch of people that had bet against GameStop. And then people started putting money into GameStop and it had this crazy resurgence on the stock market. And then there was all the controversy with like Robinhood stopped let you trading that stock. It was a whole thing. And that's actually happening again right now as we speak. So it's interesting that these two stories are kind of together in a way, in my opinion. But so Nat Turner joining the board. And I was kind of looking up some information for this show. And I stumbled across, so Neo Cards and Comics had a YouTube video called PSAs and GameStop's collaboration is a massive success. And if you want to go see more, if you want to see them dive into the data a little bit more, go check out that video on YouTube. But there was rumors that they were saying that they had heard through the grapevine that GameStop essentially had graded roughly between $80K and $100K worth of cards. And then there was an SEC filing where $1.5 million was attributed to this new program through GameStop. And if you take the average cost to grade a card, those numbers kind of add up. I don't know if there's an exact number that you could pull from the 1.5 million or the 80K to 100K cards. The other very interesting thing was that then they looked at the October data for PSA, which I'll be interested to see what happens when this data comes out again for the month of November. But they looked at the data from GemRate of PSA's month over month, year over year. And both numbers are up, month over month from September to October, which is when the program launched. It was up 23%. And year to year, it was up 21%, which I don't think the year over year maybe has as much to do with this. I think the month to month definitely does. But the other pretty wild statistic here was if you were looking at the numbers and you're breaking down if you're dividing some of that data there and you're saying, let's say it's 80. Let's just round. Let's be conservative here. 80K. Let's say they did 80K in total cards graded. That is 30K more, almost double what Beckett did the whole month of October. Beckett did 50K in cards, which I've talked about Beckett. There's a reason why there aren't as many cards graded by Beckett. It's not just that people don't like Beckett. I think that is one of the reasons, but I think the main reason is that they're grading more expensive cards. So there's less cards being graded. There's more RPAs and autographs and stuff along those lines, I think, being graded. But I do think it's also, if you look at this, it's pretty crazy, the number here, which I think it has a lot to do with TCG. Like if you're going to GameStop, that's probably one of the higher. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 75-25. No, I actually probably wouldn't be surprised if it's like a 90-10 TCG to sports cards for people that are going to GameStop to get their cards graded. But PSA in the month of October graded 1.45 million cards. Beckett did 50K. And those numbers are pretty shocking in my opinion. Like, sure, I think you could look at the Beckett number and say it makes sense that there's going to be less cards, but for there to be less than like 1 point, I mean, just doing the math kind of off the top of my head, I mean, that's like, so if there's 100K and if there's 100 and there was a million, that'd be 10. So you add there. So it's like 2%, 2 to 5%. I'm just estimating there. 2 to 5% of the amount of cards that were graded were through Beckett compared to PSA. And obviously there was like another thing where it's like Beckett's parent company. Apparently the CEO of that company is in some trouble here. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to go into that on an episode. I don't know if I have as much knowledge on that. Maybe I'll look into a little bit more and see if I can find more data and something that might be interesting to talk about on the podcast. But and year over year, Beckett, that October number is down 33%. So I don't know. It's pretty shocking if I'm going to be completely honest. Like I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people have been talking about the downfall of Beckett. I don't even know if it's really a trending topic at this point. Like, what has Beckett really done to fail? I think that it's been a pretty slow process here. Now we're down to 50K total cards graded, which again, I think that there are probably some high value cards, some RPAs graded there. So the 50K number may be a little bit deceiving, but I don't know. PSA might be starting to take over that process. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few years we see PSA come out with some sort of marketing campaign or something to try and get more of that market share, because realistically they're going to try and take all of it. I think they're at a point where I think CGC and SGC, which SGC and PSA are still kind of working together there too. So like, they're not necessarily different, but I wouldn't be surprised if PSA tries to start taking much more of the RPA high-end autograph grading and try and just, I don't know. I don't think they can put Beckett out of business necessarily, but like, it is a pretty shocking statistic there to look at those two numbers. And even if you're looking at percentages, even if you're just looking at percentages of total cards graded year over year, PSA at 1.4 million versus Beckett at 50K. Even if you look at percentages, PSA is up 21%, Beckett's down 33%, which is, fairly not uncommon for Beckett, unfortunately, now in this era that we're in sports cards. So what I think is going to be good for PSA and Nat Turner, I think that they're going to make grading just easier. Like, that's what I think that they're trying to do here. They've already made it pretty easy. Like, if you're going to a card show, they are very accessible. Like, they're at a ton of shows. Like, they'll be at the Sports Card Spectacular in Chicago, which I was planning on going to, but I actually am going to visit some family in New York this weekend, so I won't unfortunately be able to go, but PSA will be there. They made it easy there, but I think that they're trying to make it easy for people that don't know what they're doing, which makes sense from a GameStop perspective. You bring your stuff in there and you get it graded through GameStop. I don't think that PSA necessarily would be able to take over the business model of just like stealing money from people necessarily. Like, not stealing money. Maybe I'm a little bit jaded because I've gone into GameStop with like games that are only a year old and they're like, yeah, we'll give you $3 for it. I don't know if PSA will be able to ever do something like that, but I think the buying and selling of the cards, maybe that's where, again, Nat Turner, you're able to buy and sell as well as get cards graded. So they're, in a way, trying to, like, PSA is trying to get into the card store game, I guess. That's how I would look at it. Similar to how I think Fanatics, like we talked about yesterday on Fanatics with the shows, similar how they are trying to get into different avenues. I don't know. I think it's probably a good idea for PSA to try and do something similar. Like, in 10 years from now, if you're to sit back and say PSA and Fanatics are the two biggest companies in the sports card industry, that definitely wouldn't surprise me. I think that they're making the moves that are in they're making the moves that are trying to get more casual sports card and trading card people into the industry. And I look at video games in a way, unfortunately, I think that I do see some similarities. Like they're catering to casuals, and I don't know casuals, whatever. People who are casual in this industry, they're the ones that I think you're going to see a lot of fluctuation of coming in and leaving, where the people who are in this industry, who have been in it for a while, those people are really not leaving in the same way that the casual people are. And it could even just be like a year thing for people like that, for people who are more casually into sports cards potentially. So, and I think that's where PSA and I think Fanatics are really trying to, I think that's their marketing strategy when it comes to getting new people. I think they're trying to cast a very wide net to get people into the industry that are going to then turn into the loyal customers who are in this day to day doing sports cards, or investing in cards, or buying cards, or getting cards graded every single day. And they're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to grade cards or buy and sell if you're PSA with GameStop, or just even go to an event where you're going to see things and see people that you like if you're Fanatics. So I don't know. I think we're going to see a lot more diving into trying to figure out how to get more casual people into sports cards versus catering towards the people who, like I said, are in this industry day in and day out, and really are, I don't know, grinding necessarily. Like I think we're going to see these companies move away from trying to cater to those people to trying to cast that wide net and get more people into the industry overall.
This week hasn't been filled with too much news, in my opinion. I mean, Topps Chrome really is going to be the big story that you're seeing a lot of people talk about. There is a few different things here that I'll touch on and kind of give my thoughts. Last week, as I was looking for topics, honestly, this was last week, something that I didn't cover. The WWE cards, essentially, the new, I think it was Topps Chrome, those have been leaked, I guess. Or I don't know. I mean, a wrestler posted them on their Instagram story, so I guess they're not necessarily leaked. I haven't seen Topps post about them. That's why I'm using the word leaked, I guess. The wrestler posted about the autos that they were signing. And so WWE has flip-flopped back and forth between Topps and Panini. And I don't really know like what kind of impact that has on a sports brand, I guess. It can't be good necessarily, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it going back and forth, it really is going to be kind of like WWE, and actually maybe similar to soccer, where WWE, when a wrestler gets to the WWE, there's a decent shot they've gone through a bunch of different developmental places, which if I'm Topps or Panini, if I'm Panini, actually, this is probably what I'm doing. I am probably trying to use wrestling as the brand and come out with, wrestling products of places that are not WWE, AEW. I think TNA and AEW are combined. It's kind of confusing to me, if I'm going to be completely honest, but I would say one thing that I think Panini could do that I think would maybe be a good idea would be to go and try and find some of these smaller wrestling promotions. I don't know. And New Japan isn't even really necessarily that's not even like a small wrestling promotion. That's like, other than WWE, that's probably one of the bigger ones within the world. Within the United States, obviously AEW and TNA are they're probably a little bit more popular to the casual wrestling fan. A lot of people know that like some of the biggest wrestlers in those promotions came from, Kenny Omega, for example, came from, Shinsuke Nakamura also came over from Japan. I mean, they're not necessarily, Kenny Omega, one of the bigger stars in AEW, not really so much in WWE with some of the other stars, but that's because I don't know. I think the WWE went through a weird period in the past few years where they changed up who was writing the stories and who was running the company. So I don't know. I think if or Topps or Panini would want to do this. I think it would be more beneficial for Panini to potentially do this. Or if Topps came out with like a Bowman-esque product, because it's clear that they're trying to expand the Bowman brand. So I don't know. I mean, getting wrestlers, like, sure, maybe because the thing is with Bowman and with wrestlers, there are going to be players, or within baseball, there are going to be players that have a lot of hype, but most of the time, the players that end up being the best within a product, you don't really know until they're playing in the majors, which for WWE, you wouldn't really know until they get to the WWE necessarily. Like, we're also going through a shift, I think, in who the top wrestlers are. I mean, I know Roman Reigns has been one of the biggest. I know Cody Rhodes, obviously. And I've actually had a little bit of a resurgence myself watching WWE. So that would be one reason why I would be interested in them coming out with some sort of Bowman program or Bowman products. I don't know if they would be able to really expand to some of these other promotions. I mean, they obviously now they have the WWE. But I think that would be interesting. Another piece of news is Paige Beckers. You heard about how the Dallas Wings, they got the first pick in the upcoming WNBA draft, but Paige Beckers now has signed with Panini, which this is very smart. I think if you're Panini, this is almost a no-brainer. You have to sign her. Like, you didn't almost lose Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, but like they're the two biggest names. Like you almost lost them if they wanted to sign with Topps. You're going to need Paige Beckers in next year's products. Like let's just get one thing straight. Like if you're Panini and you are trying to put up any fight, because yesterday on the podcast I talked about the comparison between PSA and Beckett, where PSA has just gone so like skyrocketed in terms of their popularity and what they've done overall versus what Beckett has done. I don't know if there's really as much of a comparison. Maybe it's more of like, I don't know, maybe because PSA Beckett, I don't really think that's as good a comparison, but I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years that is the comparison that we're making between Panini or Topps and Fanatics and Panini. If I don't know what the metric would be, but I think Panini is really going to have to make some big changes and really figure out what their strategy is to capture an audience maybe that Topps isn't trying to get. And I think expanding WNBA makes a lot of sense. Getting Paige Beckers, signing her to that contract obviously makes a lot of sense. It's first of all, it's a no-brainer, but it's also like you had to do this because I don't know if you don't have her in those products, like it's almost like what they did with football and basketball, where the biggest stars from a specific year, they aren't in the products, or their autos aren't in the products, which Panini can't afford to do that again realistically. And they did it again this year, kind of with like some of the top quarterbacks going to Topps over at Panini. Like I think Panini really only has like JJ McCarthy, who didn't play this whole year. I would have, with how good the Vikings are, I would have been very interested to see what would have happened if JJ McCarthy had played this year, because you kind of have to figure that JJ McCarthy is probably just as good as Sam Darnold. Maybe Sam Darnold is a little bit underrated in my opinion. Like maybe that's one thing you look at and you say, well, Sam Darnold, sure, like didn't have a great season, didn't have a great career with the Jets, kind of goes on to be this backup and then gets signed to, or goes over to Minnesota. So, and then is thrown into the starting role when JJ McCarthy probably was planned on being the starting quarterback there, if I had to really guess. But it's like, I would be very interested to have seen what would have happened if JJ McCarthy had been there and if they had been this good, because again, that would be, for Panini, that would have been like such a good scenario for them, that they really do have to lock in these quarterbacks. And unfortunately, this probably means that we're going to see more exclusive autograph deals, which if you listen to the show, you've heard my disdain for the exclusive autograph contracts. But I think as long as both companies are still doing it, they're both going to have to unfortunately participate in these exclusive deals. I almost wish there was some sort of gentleman's agreement or some sort of handshake deal here with Panini and Topps that they would look at it and say, I won't sign anybody to an exclusive. You don't sign anybody to an exclusive, and give each person or give each company the ability to sign or no, not even sign. Sorry. To give each people the ability to have cards of both of the players within both companies' products. This isn't like I'm going to use a wrestling analogy. This isn't like a Raw versus SmackDown thing where it's like both of these companies